Okay, all right, sorry, we hadn't obviously pre-planned this, but I shall rise having attached my name to this amendment and being one of the two people who've done so, who are here to speak in favour of it, with some unexpectedness. So I rise to speak to Amendment 141, which introduces a carefully planned and worked through, as noble lords can see, plan for automatic voter registration. And I think it's a great pity that the noble Lady Baroness Varsi, given the time of this debate, is not able to be with us, but I hope that we might perhaps return to this at report stage, and I think it would be particularly interesting to hear from both the noble Lady Baroness Varsi and also, of course, the noble Lord Woolley. And I would note that I think many of the issues that this amendment addresses, the noble Lord, in his speech on voter ID, similarly addressed about the importance of allowing the engagement of everybody in our electoral process. So I would urge people who haven't read or seen that speech to catch up with it, because I think it's a really important one. To put the case for why we need automatic voter registration, when I was reflecting on this, I thought that this sounds like the sort of thing we'd normally be doing in the Moses Room, in Grand Committee, some detailed statutory instrument going through the dusty tomes. But of course, this is far, far from a bureaucratic detail. Rather, to bring in automatic voter registration would be the long-delayed completion of a democratic progression of a couple of centuries, right through the 19th century Reform Acts, the 20th century women's suffrage, a vital step to ensuring that everyone eligible to vote actually has that vote available to them. The fact is, people don't have that practical opportunity now. As I said at second reading, just because the government is trying to slash away what little democracy we have at this country with many elements of the bill it's brought before us, doesn't mean we can't use this opportunity to set out a way forward to reform, repair our archaic, dysfunctional UK constitution. For there are what's known in the shorthand as the missing millions, people who are eligible to vote but not registered for the right. An Electoral Commission study from 2019 suggested their numbers exceed 9 million, while more than 5 million people are incorrectly registered. And the fact is, those millions are not some random sample of the population. It's the young and those in private rental accommodation, many of whom, of course, have to move often, are massively underrepresented on the rolls and by our so-called democracy. Now, this ties back to the debate we were having earlier about votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. Those people are least likely to vote Conservative. So what this amendment is about is not just about people's individual rights. It's about ensuring that our electoral results actually reflect the views of the people. Now, the background to this, of course, is that individual electoral registration was introduced in 2014. It did clean up the messes, and I'm sure I'm far from the only member of your Lordship's House who's knocked on the doors of a very small flat at which there are apparently 16 people registered, and it's not a case of fraud, it's just a case of various people have moved in and out and names have just been added without being removed. But it also cleaned out millions of people who should have been on those rolls, particularly, for example, young people, students at university. And I think this is a really important point, and I hope the noble Lord the Minister might be able to address to this. It's not even easy to check whether you are registered correctly. If you look on the Electoral Commission website, it says, this is the only information it provides. Contact the Electoral Services team at your local council. And that's how you go about checking whether you're on the electoral roll, which is a far from simple, easy process. So I don't know if the noble Lord the Minister can suggest whether the government plans any improvements on that simple step so that people can check if they are actually registered. Now, just to briefly address the details of this amendment, noble lords can see it, so I won't read through it all, but automatic voter registration needn't be complicated or introduce a large bureaucratic burden. Schools and colleges could register young people as attainers, those about to become voters. University students could be registered by their universities. When you change the address on your driver's licence, something everyone's legally obliged to do, or register for council tax. or have contact with the Department for Work and Pensions. All of those things could feed into the electoral roll. It's where government knows where people are. So, of course, I think I'll make one final point, because I'm sure other people will have many other things to say on this important amendment. But, of course, automatic voter registration won't guarantee that people will turn out to vote. Already, typically, fewer than 70% of people on the roll turn out in general elections, and often 30% or less in council elections. But giving people the opportunity, making sure that their name is there on the rolls as it should be, without having to go to extraordinary efforts, that surely has to be something essential to make any claim to calling this country a democracy.